At least 4 times this morning we have heard the word humble in each of the lessons and one of the hymns. And I wonder what that word means to you. What does humble mean? Does it mean meek? Does it mean soft? Does it mean, what does it mean to you? Is it passive? Most of us probably think that. It's not a characteristic of humankind to hold high the idea of humbleness, especially in our culture. We need to be number one. We need to be great again. Nothing says anything about being humble. To be humble. To be humble riding on a donkey. To be humble coming into Jerusalem. To be humble as he walks through Holy Week, as he walks us through Holy Week, is to look at humility in a very different way. To look at humility not as something that you step back from, but something that you step into. Humility takes courage. And as we watch this man go through this week, as we watch those around him who run away, we are invited into the courage of his humility. This week I ran across a piece about Jackie Robinson, who was the first of African American to play Major League Baseball. And people gave him a pretty rough time. And one day he talks about, in his biography, he talks about what he called a rage-crazed moment. And he thought, listening to the people in the dugout on the other side calling him all kinds of names and making slurs and slanders at him, he said, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm just going to go over and I'm going to take my big black fist that they hate and I'm just going to punch them all out and throw my bat down, and that's the end of it. Well, he caught himself and thought, if I do that, I will never be a sports star. And he said, and what do I say to my son? Do I say to my son, someday I could tell you the story, his son could say, someday I'll tell you the story of what his daddy could have been if he hadn't been trying too much to be too much of a man. And as we know, the rest of his career, it took a lot of courage to live out in the face of much hostility, the life that he lived. There's a prize-winning journalist. His name is James Nachtwey. Does anybody know that name? I didn't, but I've seen lots of his pictures, it turns out. He's been he's a photojournalist. He's been taking pictures for maybe 40 years. Those iconic pictures that came out of Vietnam, out of Somalia, around the world are his. He goes into the worst possible places that no person can really ever get to, but he does it anyhow. And he goes in and he takes pictures of the suffering, of the reality that's there. His pictures at Vietnam, for those of you who are old enough to remember, we were being told a pack of lies about what was going on in Vietnam. And he went and took pictures and came home with the pictures that told the truth about what was going on. And it turned the course of our country. People took to the streets when they saw the truth. This week I'm reminded that this is the 50th anniversary of the My Lai massacre. And these pictures and the American people got rid of a president and turned the course of the war. In Somalia, he took pictures of what was happening in the civil war there that nobody really knew about. And when he brought these pictures home and showed them to people around the world, the United Nations decided that they finally had to do something about these people and what was going on. And time after time after time, James took pictures. His last round of pictures is a whole issue of Time on the opioid crisis in our country. Stunning, stunning pictures about a horrible, horrible mess we're in. His mantra is this: the only way to stop suffering is to bear witness to it. The only way to stop suffering is to bear witness to it. Jesus' people knew that. Jesus knew that. Jesus came, remember, as we open Mark's gospel, Mark says, the good news of the Son of God who's bringing a regime change. Things won't be the same after this man. He's bringing to us what God has always hoped for us. And he does it not by going and talking to the high priests and convincing them that this is the right thing to do. He does it by going out to those who are suffering. And we need to remember that 98% of the people in Palestine in Jesus' day were suffering. The Romans had their boots on their necks. The high priests and the religious establishment really had all of the money. They controlled everything. And the poor and the downtrodden people lost their lands. They had little to go on. They were taxed unbelievably. They were in pain and suffering. And Jesus goes to them to witness to their suffering. And the officials do not like it. And so he comes into town riding on a donkey in kind of a mock parade. Because remember, on the other side of town, coming in from Maritima Caesarea, is a cohort of Caesar's troops. And Pontius Pilate come to make sure there's peace kept during Passover. So from one end of town, from the east side, which is where Messiah is coming from, comes Jesus and his little cohort. From the other side comes Pontius Pilate riding his great stallion to show what the power of Rome is like. And between that power and the power that the religious establishment holds, they will do Jesus in. Now, this story is told by Mark to a little community in Rome who were under terrible persecution after Nero fiddled while Rome burned. He had to find somebody to blame it on, so he blamed it on the Christians. And at any moment in the middle of the night, you could hear a knock on the door, and you'd get pulled out of your house and you'd taken to the Colosseum, where you'd be thrown to the wild beast who would eat you alive. Mark's little community was terrified. They were under horrible persecution. And Mark writes this gospel about Jesus to say, somebody has gone before you and made it through all the way, and so can you. It won't be easy. It will take piles of courage, but you've seen him do it, and you can do it too. That's really what Mark is asking us today. Can we be that courageous? Yesterday, a 9-year-old girl whose name was Yolanda King stood up at the March for Our Lives in Washington. And she said, 50-some years ago, my grandfather was standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And he said, I have a dream. I have a dream that someday my 4 children will be judged not by the color of their skin, they will be judged by their character. And Yolanda said, I have a dream that enough is enough. Our kids are in pain. They are watching their fellow students gunned down year after year after year. And they have to do drills to protect themselves. Now, I remember when we used to have air raid drills. There are a few of you here will remember that. And we would go down in the basement because we knew sooner or later some Russian was going to push that button. Well, we never saw it, but our kids are seeing it. Our kids are seeing it all of the time. And they now have the courage to stand up and to say, we have a dream too, and enough is enough. And they're asking you and me to join them. To say that we cannot put our children in that kind of danger. I don't want to get into the whole gun thing, but our kids are in danger. And we have to find a way to stop it. They need to be learning from books, not learning how to hide. So we come to this day, to this passion, to this sign of incredible, humble courage. And we're asked to walk that way. He's been asking us all Lent. Pick up your cross and follow me. Pick up your cross and follow me. Look up. Look up. I will draw the whole world to myself on that cross with courage and deep humility. And so we come, like so many of those have gone before us, before we listen to this story one more time, we come to the table to be fed, to be strengthened, so that we in courage can walk that same walk. That's our call, but it also is a promise. Amen.